Oh, I think you're going to enjoy this one. Bill Heeter is a collector for last 40 years or so. He's collected Simpsons and Grinch and Roger Rabbit, different Warner Brother pieces. He's got quite the story of collecting and displaying his art publicly, things like that. I think you're really going to enjoy Bill. I'm going to move over here. We might do a picture in picture for a moment because before we actually started the interview, I was showing off some of my different Simpsons things that were in the background because, of course, he wanted to see that. And I wanted to show them off. So we had a little bit of a pre-taping video where I hit record and we're showing these things off. And I thought, maybe you'll see a little bit of that before we get started. But either way, enjoy this interview with Bill Heeter. I think you're really going to like it. And again, if you like these type of interviews, and if you have a suggestion or anyone you think I should interview on this channel, feel free to reach out. You can message me right here on YouTube. And I would like to hear it or put something in the comments. I could always see, and I love seeing your comments too. Different parts that you liked or different questions for Bill. I don't mind relaying those to him. Feel free to do that and enjoy. I have to have the KBBL studio.
Oh, funny. Harry Shearer. And yeah. That's
Nobody
great.
rocks like Bill and Marty. And this was a cool little series that The Simpsons put out, those special environments with the characters.
Yeah, I really love those secondary characters. Those probably are tertiary. They don't show up very often, but I really enjoy the Krusty the Clowns and the Barney Gumbles and all that kind of stuff. I get a big kick out of them.
I know. And the more, once you get older, there's a few things I realized when I watched wrestling. I liked all the good guys, but when I got older, I loved all the bad guys. They were so much more fun to watch. And it's like that with The Simpsons. You like the main characters. You're like, oh, Homer's so funny. But the older you got, all the different cast members of that show were so brilliant. And there's so many great characters put out that you find yourself really gravitating towards some of the other ones. I love Moe and Krusty. And I mean, there's so many of them out there that you go back and look at just how funny they were. And they made the most of every line. I really like that.
I had the opportunity to meet, to sit in on a table read. So basically a rehearsal where they had all the actors there, voice artists there. And we sit in the background, you don't really engage with them when they're in the middle of it. But afterwards, we were able to meet a couple of them. And I met Hank Azaria.
Ooh.
And, he and Harry Shearer and Dan Castellaneta, the whole group are fabulous. But so here's this big moment. I get the chance to meet Hank Azaria and I just fumble it. And it's like, boy, you're really talented. How do you come up with these voices? And he just looks at me and goes, I'm an actor. This is what we do. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point. So
that's cool to be invited for something like that. So how many pieces of animation art, how many cels do you actually own?
You don't want to know that.
It's a lot.
I have 4 or 5 different collections, and I would say probably I don't count them, but I would guess between 750 and 1,000.
Okay, that's a sizable collection.
Yeah, it's something I've been doing since 1980. I had a chance to buy a Warner Brothers piece, and it was $100, and my hand was shaking when I wrote that check because I was straight out of school. I didn't have $100 laying around, but I was not going to pass up the chance to buy a Chuck Jones cel. So I bought one, and one led to 2. And after that, it became a serious addiction.
That's what always happens. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And addiction's the only word for it. I didn't realize that when I purchased my first cel that I would want to research and search for every other cel I've always wanted after that. I didn't realize how much that would grab onto me.
You're right. That's exactly what happens. And you go, oh, I remember, especially for me, I really enjoy seasons like 3 through 8. Those are kind of my sweet spot. And occasionally they'll roll up in syndication and I'll go, oh, I forgot that scene from that episode. I got to find that cel. And of course, that's a needle in a haystack because they've been distributing for 30 years and who knows what gallery it went to. And most of them are already owned by somebody, but that's part of it's the thrill of the chase.
Wow. How much time do you spend in your free time searching for items? Is it daily?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. Like, if I get bored, I'll hop on eBay and I'll just do a generic search and I'll be like, I wonder if there's anything new out there today.
That's
No.
exactly right. It's not that I'm specifically looking to buy something. It's more just to see what's available. And occasionally I will buy something, but it's just to kind of stay in tune with what the market is like and what people are selling and that kind of thing.
So for the most part, what do you primarily focus on now? What kind of collections?
Well, most of what I collect right now is one of two things, actually. If it's animation art, it would be The Simpsons.
Hmm.
And I love Dr. Seuss's original illustrations. So I'm kind of building a collection of that, just these
Wow,
weird and bizarre characters that he drew over the years. And I love tracking those down. Those are a lot of fun.
that is cool. You probably find because of the popularity that prices are all over the board, normally very inflated. I'm guessing just because if they know what something is, then that happens with everyone. They get a collection of something. It's been sitting in their attic forever, and they pull it out and they think, oh, because it's old, it's worth a ton of money. That's not always the case. So that's got to be difficult when you know what you want, you know how much it's relatively worth, but the person that has it overvalues it, and then it means you'll never get your hands on it.
You're exactly right. You exactly nailed it. There's a couple people on eBay right now who have just crazy money on the pieces, and I just look at it. I look at it as a big part of opportunity cost. For what they're asking, I can buy 4 or 5 other cells for that same amount of money. So I would much rather have the 4 or 5 other cells than that particular piece. Although I'd love to get that particular piece, but
Yeah.
not going to happen sometimes. Got to be able to walk away.
That's kind of happening with Simpsons right now. If
It
you go
is.
online, there's a lot of Simpsons animation cells out there that are going for outrageous prices right now. And
Yeah.
it makes it difficult because I'm kind of at that point where I bought my first Simpsons cell. I really like it. And it's like, at this rate, I don't think I'll ever be able to get another one because I can't see myself spending over $1,000 for one. But that's how some of these are going as of late. And
Oh yeah.
for like the really nice ones, or you're talking like background animation, sometimes go for 2,000 or something along those lines. So you look at it and you think, man, I know it wasn't like this all the time. Like when you first started buying Simpsons art in the 90s, how much did they go for? What was the introductory price?
Um, well, it wasn't that different than what the list retail is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say the average price was maybe $400 a cell
Okay.
in the early to mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Then the issue wasn't so much the price, it was finding them
Hmm.
because there were so many more galleries in the 90s. And really until the dot-com boost in the late 90s, I bet there were 30, 40 galleries around the country.
Oh.
And The Simpsons would be distributed across those. So if you heard, okay, they're releasing cells from this episode, that's great, but where are you going to find it among the 40 galleries? So I used to have a little black book, and I would start calling the galleries and ask them if they have this or that or the other. And so what happened was the prices went up, but not substantially in the late 90s. And then the dot-com bust happened, and there was actually, the prices were depressed for years, especially for The Simpsons because they were releasing new art.
Hmm.
So it wasn't as though it's vintage. There's plenty of stuff that was still in the archives. And it's just been the last couple of years that the really since Disney bought Fox,
Hmm.
the supply of cells has really diminished significantly.
Hmm.
So
Do you call
and
some
so is the number of
shenanigans?
galleries. Sorry.
Do you call any shenanigans on that? Do you think that they are purposely throttling art and releasing it that way to try to keep the value up?
No, I don't. I honestly think now that Disney owns Fox, it's just not important to them. When you think of everything that Disney does, and Fox really, especially The Simpsons, that wasn't theirs until recently. My understanding is they're shorthanded in their licensing department and some other areas, and I just think it's not a priority. They just don't have the resources to deal with it. So they do it more to accommodate the distributor and those of us who collect it than they do out of any interest in it. I'm speculating, but I think that's pretty accurate.
So
It's unfortunate.
Because right before we started recording, I was talking about that one gallery in Tacoma where you're sitting on the Simpsons couch. That is awesome. And I got to say, you bring your art out and you travel and you display your art. Tell me about the audience reaction when you do something like that. Because for me, I didn't realize this was a hobby. When I first found out about it, it was just random on the internet. I didn't
Mhm.
realize this was a thing. I'm wondering how many other people walk into one of your art exhibits and they, for the first time, understand, oh, I didn't realize people collected animation cells.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's plagued animation is a lot of people don't consider it an art form,
Hmm.
which is crazy. But even Jack Warner didn't consider the Warner Brothers animators and the art they did an art form because he had probably 95% of the cells trashed in the early 60s. Literally years and years, hundreds of thousands of cells were trashed because they didn't value it. Um, my wife Christy and I love we love to share the art. It's fun to see other people's reactions, just as you said. And in Tacoma, and we actually did one of our first exhibits here in Colorado Springs, where I live, at the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center. And that was for a collection of cells from How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So we would
Awesome.
just kind of wander around and eavesdrop on people. I mean, hopefully it wasn't creepy, but it was fun to just hear people talk about it, because at that exhibit, it was grandparents, their kids, and their kids. So 3 generations. And they're all, oh, do you remember the scene when the Grinch did this or Max did that? And it's fun to hear other people kind of reminiscing about the same things that we enjoy.
Oh, that's
So it's
amazing.
a blast. It's a
What
blast.
was the Grinch? Would he walk with kind of like a T-Rex arms or like Mr. Burns? Is that how he would walk when he was sneaking? That's you going around the exhibit listening to other people?
Exactly. And many would say I look like the Grinch, so it worked well.
You know
Yeah,
what?
and I do love Mr. Burns, by the way. I do
Yeah.
love the Tyrannosaurus Rex hands. Those are pretty funny.
You know, what's interesting, I find with some collectors, and it's not like this with everyone, it's almost 75-25. I think about it, and this is my unfair breakdown, but I would say about 75% of the collectors collect because they like the character or the artwork, and 25 collect because they know who the artist is and they respect that type of art style. So you kind of look at it both ways, or do you tend to lean on one side over the other?
Well, yeah, to me, it's quite different. With Chuck Jones, I love anything Chuck Jones, and it can be a watercolor, it can be an oil that he's done, it can be an animation cell, it can be a non-animation piece of fine art that he's done. So it's really Chuck Jones centric. With The Simpsons, it's not so much. I mean, I love a lot of the early directors like Wes Archer and David Silverman and Oakley and Weinstein and those guys, but um, I really look for 2 things in The Simpsons, and
Mhm.
that is the character's expression, which I love, specific. I pulled a few cells here. Let me just see if I have
Yes,
one
I
to
would love
show
to see
you.
them.
I'm not sure if I have any that demonstrate exactly, but things like this, if you can see this here.
Oh, of course.
Is that visible for you?
I kind of remember that. Well, pull it up a little bit closer. Now,
Okay.
this is going to be a perfect test for me on the different scenes. Well, they look like they're dressed in church garb there. Did they visit Abe after a church? I don't know.
I don't remember the exact episode. I just love Grandpa's expression.
Oh, of
Ah, get those
course.
kids off me. That's the kind of thing. And, you know, again, things like this. Yeah, this one kind of gave me nightmares after I first got it. um, it may be something where here's an example of the kind of thing that I was referring to.
Back it up just a little bit. Double homer in that one. So that's like a
Yeah,
progression, like the start and the end type of
yep,
deal.
yep, exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and the exaggerated expressions I think are a lot of fun. Here's one that I thought was very intriguing.
Oh, yeah. That one shows up a lot on, I forgot what gallery's website. They show that one. Oh, boy. Which one was it?
It might be Comic Mint,
Might be Comic Mint. Yeah. I've seen
but
it. I've seen them on one of them. Yeah. Look at
yeah,
that folder
Andrew's got
that's
it.
in. Is that how Fox would originally distribute them, or in those white folders?
Yeah, yeah. And when I frame pieces, everything I'm showing you here is not framed. But when I frame them, I save the folders because they
Yeah.
don't distribute them that way anymore. And I really
Right.
like them. Here's one from a Treehouse episode with your pal Krusty.
That little Krusty, or what was
Little
his name?
Krusty, yeah, yeah.
That was when the Krusty Doll went crazy, right? Yeah, I think
Yeah, it's a
so.
spoof of the Telly Savalas episode where he's got his stepdaughter, and his stepdaughter has this new doll, and the doll says, "I don't like you very much. I'm going to kill
Yeah.
you." And so this is a spoof of that. By the way, I love these little tangential things, but in that episode on the Twilight Zone, June Foray did the voice of the little girl, of the doll, I mean. And June Foray, she did one episode of The Simpsons, but she was Witch Hazel and all the characters on Warner Brothers. So
That's so
she
cool.
she was Rocky in Rocky and Bullwinkle,
Oh, wow.
Natasha. And so she had 60, 70 years of voice work, and it was on television as well as in cartoons.
That's
So
remarkable,
fun.
honestly.
I thought you'd get a kick out of this one.
Of course.
That's from a slideshow that was being done in an episode. Here's, a lot of people um, just like the family, and I understand that, and I've got some cells of the whole family.
Okay, well, let's look at something like that. So you have the individual family members. Is the frame of the car a cell as well?
Let's see. In this particular case, it is. So there's the back side.
Oh, wow. They're all painted on the same one, though. It's not like individual cells.
Yeah, so it must have been a held scene or something. You're right, because normally they would do it as multiple layers.
Yeah.
But
that is cool.
This is one where they're all in the same. This was from, it says it's distributed in 2001. That's when the episode's from. So it was, probably season 11 or 12 then. They stopped doing animation cells, I think, midway through season 13.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, it's been digital, which is why these are pretty unusual. Here's another pretty humorous one.
Oh, what is the? It says Bart name world's greatest. Wait, extra. I'm trying to remember which one that was from.
It was just on syndication like 2 weeks ago. And I can't remember the episode.
I remember when he went over to the Flanders house and they had that one press, and I thought it was like whoever smells, one of the kids was the headline for that one.
Yeah, Rotter Todd smells.
Yeah, Todd smells. Yeah. Extra.
Yeah. I'm not sure where there's some. I mean, I tell there's a lot of really hardcore Simpsons fans who can probably recite every single episode here, and my mind's too cluttered these days. I can't keep them straight. But this was a special one. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, sure, smoking
clearly,
like that.
But the thing that's is it's signed Bill. It's a pleasure. Peace, Julie Kavner. And the reason this is so special is Julie doesn't sign cells. She doesn't, for some reason, she doesn't want to be associated with Marge on television or anywhere else. So she doesn't do signings, doesn't do personal appearances as Marge Simpson. But in this particular case, she was looking for a certain cell that I happen to own. And the distributors knew I owned it and got in touch with me and said, Julie would really like this cell to give to her sister. Would you be open to trading it? And I said, well, if it's that important to her, yeah, fine, So we swapped cells, but I said, but I do have one caveat. I have to ask her to sign a cell for me.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, absolutely. And I got to tell you, so I met her at this table read. It happened to be right before the table read. She could not have been more gracious.
Oh, awesome.
It was terrific. I didn't know what to expect. And she came over. Oh, Bill, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. My sister will appreciate it. What do you want me to sign? And it was
wow.
Really cool. Here's a Michael Jackson one.
Oh, of course. What a great scene right there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like in here, bad is good. You can't really read it, but bad is good. From Michael Jackson.
The interesting thing too is when you go back and watch some of these episodes, you realize that what was framed on the TV is small compared to what the larger size is. You get to see so much more of what the artist's direction and their vision is when you look at a cell that wasn't broadcast. It's like you own something that only what it looks like in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, it's not unusual at all that like I'll show this one here where Homer's got, I think it's his last dinner before he's scheduled to be executed. So he's drinking Duff beer and has chicken, but most likely, I don't remember specifically, but it could have easily been cropped very close here when the
Yeah.
director filmed it. I don't know if you can see it that way, but
Oh yeah.
so they would zoom in frequently and you didn't even know what the background was because it never showed up in the episode. So
That's amazing.
those are just kind of some pieces that I had handy that I thought kind of illustrated the expressions and the scenes that I
Yeah,
go
and
for.
oh man, so many Simpsons fans. I think about the producers knowing that you have a large collection. How have they ever reached out in any other context? Because how do they even know you had that certain piece? Like how did they know to contact you when they were searching for one piece?
Well, in that particular case, I mean, I've been collecting a long time and have reached out to a lot of galleries who work with the distributors. So in this case, the gallery let I think the distributor reached out to the galleries, a few of them, and said, didn't we sell this to one of you people? And if we did, who did you sell it to?
Mhm.
And they pointed the finger to me. And so the distributor reached out and on behalf of Julie, and we did the trade. So yeah, they tracked me down.
Nothing's private anymore.
Yeah,
They'll find you
nothing.
if they need to.
Yeah, for
That is
better
so
and
cool.
worse.
There's so many writers and things. I do have a Simpsons book. I'm seeing if I have anything else, but man, when you start looking at Simpsons today, are you still buying or have you pretty much satisfied everything you're looking for with them?
Never satisfied. Never. No, what I'm always doing is culling my collection.
Mhm.
So if I see a cell from a scene and I think that cell is better than the one I own, then I'll try to purchase that one and perhaps sell mine.
Mhm.
They're still releasing art from new episodes. It's again, they only did cells to season 1 through 13, but there's still episodes that have never been released. The art is because the art comes in these huge boxes from Korea with
Mhm.
thousands of cells and they're
Yeah.
not organized. The cartons aren't well marked. They have to pair arms and legs and eyes and bodies with backgrounds.
Mhm.
So the processing of those cells is really time consuming. And there's back in the warehouse, there are still boxes of cells and boxes of backgrounds that have never been matched and never released.
Man,
So
that I would love to do that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just one of those weird people, but to open a box and to try to match things together sounds like fun. That and I know that's a ton of work. And any studio looking at that is looking at it and they're like, man, we don't need the money that bad. We're not going to make that much. By the time we open up one of these things, and who knows if we even have anything worthwhile in here, they're looking at it and they're like, who cares? We got other things we could be doing. But I think about it as a collector and say, man, that would be one of the coolest things to open a box and see what's inside of it.
oh, just give me one afternoon in that warehouse, please.
Yes,
Please.
exactly. It
But
would be the best.
what I don't think people understand is a lot of people don't understand is it could be just what you said. It could be a box of arms and eyes and legs and or the back of a character. They have a contract where they can't release cells of voice artists. So you won't find most of the cells of most of the stars. They did Michael Jackson because he passed away. I think they did Barry White. There are a few
Hmm.
released of him, but generally, contractually, they're prohibited from releasing images of their voice artists. So you have boxes of that aren't any good, and trying to pair everything up, and then finding the right scene with the right characters, with the right pose, and the gag or whatever you want. It is a needle in a haystack, and it's
Wow.
really time consuming.
That's interesting. So I guess when they sign on as to do a voice, they're not necessarily giving them the rights to merchandising or something like that. That's probably how
Correct.
they look at it.
Correct. I think they do give a seller to the artist or to the
Yeah.
voice artist, so they have a piece of memorabilia. But
Oh, that'd be perfect then.
yeah, yeah.
You have a lot of vintage art. So outside of Simpsons, you talked about Grinch. What are some of the other things that you've enjoyed collecting over the years when it comes to animation art?
One thing that's really benefited me is and it took me a while to understand this, but I've been really targeted in what I look for. In the early days, it's kind of anything that captivated me for 30 seconds. My wife kids me, I have attention span of a gnat. And that's kind of the way I was collecting for a while. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And I want this and that. And I realized over the years, I really needed to focus my effort. So it started with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because that's my all-time favorite cartoon. and we have a pretty significant collection of that. I then started collecting some of Chuck Jones limited editions, only because the production art was so hard to find and so expensive. I just couldn't afford it. Then we moved on to, which I still think is a watershed movie, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And we have a pretty substantial collection of art from that. And then, as I said, I also have a number of pieces of Rocky and Bullwinkle, which are all recreated because most of that art disappeared. There are stories that Rocky and Bullwinkle was painted in Mexico and it's not, and then they used it as shingles for their roofs down there.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Because again, nobody valued it as art. They just didn't think there was any value to it. So once the stuff was filmed, it was basically trashed. It wasn't until really the 70s that there was any kind of appreciation for what animation was in terms of a collectible.
Yeah.
So
do you
and then what else we have? As I said, the Dr. Seuss pieces, the illustrations there.
So what are you looking at when you dip over to the side like that?
I am looking at, well, I wanted to show you a couple Grinches just to give you an idea what they look like. So here's one.
Oh, look at that.
Which is, again, to try to find that exact image among the number of cells that were created. This is, in this cartoon, which was done in 1966, they were doing 24 cells per second of television time. So, or camera time. So when you do the math, if you figure 24 cells times what, it was 24 minutes or something like that, to find that exact scene with those characters like that was hard to do, and to find them was really cool. Here's another one that also have that, again, it's from the same scene, or I think it is from the same scene, but I just think to get the characters, and this I can tell from looking at it that they're both painted on the same cell layer, which is very unusual because usually the characters are moving individually, so they'll have them on separate layers, but in this case, they're together. The last thing I have from the Grinch are some concepts, and these are kind of my pride and joy from the cartoon, because this is an original concept that Chuck did when he was trying to flesh out the character.
Oh, wow.
So this is done by his hand before the Grinch was finalized, just trying to figure out what this character is going to look like and to give to his other animators so they knew the various poses. And so I get a kick out of the really early things too that kind of bring something to fruition. So
man, it's amazing to think. It's so hard to come up with an original character, just the genius involved with creating something iconic like that, to have a vision, to think of, we're going to create a character like this, and to be able to visualize it in a way that just is like his persona is the way he looks. It's just you're like holding a masterpiece. That's a genius at work. It's what you're holding.
Yeah, it is. And what I get a kick out of is, Chuck worked with Dr. Seuss in World War II on a couple of the Private Snafu cartoons for the government. And fast forward to the mid 60s, and Chuck again proposes to Dr. Seuss to do the Grinch. And I think Chuck was turned down a couple times by him. And finally, Dr. Seuss agreed to work with him. And Chuck did this. And my understanding is that Dr. Seuss wasn't particularly thrilled with the final product because he said, Chuck, this character doesn't look like my Grinch. This character looks like you. And it does. If you look at photos of Chuck Jones, that looks more like Chuck than it does of Dr. Seuss's Grinch. Oh, and they went ahead and did one more cartoon of Horton. But then after that, Dr. Seuss brought in Friz Freleng to do the additional, his character cartoons. So he only worked with Chuck on those two.
That's amazing. Even the Roger Rabbit stuff was so cool. Did you watch the new Chip and Dale that came out on Disney Plus?
No.
So they released it. It's very Roger Rabbit-esque, where it's humans living in like in sync with cartoons, kind of like living together in the same universe world. They kind of interact all in the same way. And it's very Roger Rabbit. I think you would like that if you liked Roger Rabbit. You should check it out just for that.
Oh, I will. I will. Speaking of Roger, I pulled a couple pieces here.
Ooh.
One of the things that I was really fortunate to do, and Disney abandoned their animation program years ago, but right before they did it, I was able to snag some cells from the shorts. And like Roller Coaster Rabbit and Tummy Trouble were released after the movie. Something's Cooking was in the movie, but cells like this were only available for a really short period of time.
Oh,
Roller
cool.
Coaster Rabbit. And again, to find that scene with those characters looking like that was a lot of fun. And they're rare now because I snagged them right before they discontinued the program. So Disney has said they will not release any art from any Roger Rabbits going forward at all, which I think is a real shame.
Oh, look at that. It's beautiful. The coloring, the shading.
Isn't it great?
Oh, it's just wonderful.
Yeah. And I mean, you're talking to a person who can't draw a stick person. So to see this kind of stuff, this is a larger piece here. But you probably remember that gag from Something's Cooking from the movie. And again, just a really pretty incredible piece. This is multiple layers. I don't know how many. I guess I can't get at it easily, but I think this is 4 or 5 layers for all the different knives that
you're
looking at them. I've got one other from Something's Cooking. And this is with Roger attached to the Suckalux.
Oh, the reflection on that. That was like that was near the opening, right? That was like pretty much how they opened the movie.
Yes.
And even the reflection on the ground, it's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, my goodness.
Just amazing to me. I have one other because it would never be complete showing anything Roger Rabbit without Jessica. So I've got this framed piece here. So, which is just a great, are you getting a lot of reflection or is it showing up okay?
A little bit. When you tilt it, that helps, right? Like that. Oh, man. So that scene and that character, iconic.
It is, and she is the reason that there hasn't been any additional Roger Rabbits.
Really?
There have been 3 or 4, at least from what I understand, different writers asked to develop a new movie, and inevitably there's a change in management at Disney, and inevitably they kill the project because Jessica Rabbit is no longer politically correct.
Interesting.
So, and the thing about it is she's not bad. She's just drawn that way. And they don't seem to get the joke. So I just think it's foolish. My attitude is it was never the Jessica Rabbit cartoon. It was Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
So if they didn't like the character, don't emphasize the character. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do Roger Rabbits. And,
when did you start sharing your collection for public viewing? And how did that start for you?
It started about 6 or 7 years ago in Wisconsin, where I used to live, and a city called Appleton, about 75,000 people. And they have a nice museum there called the Trout Museum of Art. And I have to give credit where credit's due. I was complaining to my wife one day. We have all this nice art and it's in the closet and it's under the bed and it's in a box. And, I wish people knew what we had and we could share it. And she just looked at me and said, quit your whining and do something about it. Call somebody and see if they have an interest. And I called the Trout Museum and they said, we'd love to do something. And we're actually doing our 4th exhibit with them early next year. And it's going to be a Simpsons exhibit. And they'll have about, I would say 150 pieces, 200 pieces on display there. And then we have the Simpsons book through 2025. We have Roger Rabbit book the next couple years. We have the Grinch in 23, 24, and 25, and Dr. Seuss in 24 and 25. Wow. So we're trying to get the museums out there interested because we want to share it. We like sharing it.
That's
We
amazing. It's
yeah,
it's just amazing.
and
Um,
we don't charge for it. Everybody says, "Oh, what do you charge?" That's not what this is about. This is about allowing museums to show it. Museums need a lot of support right now, especially in light of how COVID has affected them. So if we can help them and um, they have an interest in animation and promoting animation, we're more than happy to work with them.
you said you're married. What does your wife think about you collecting?
Oh, she's come to know, she's I guess resolved in the fact that I'm wacky that way, and she and I have to tell you, when I met the folks at the Chuck Jones showroom, I was talking to him one day and the phone rang, and I could tell the guy I was working with was not happy with the phone call. I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Oh, we got one of the two words we never want to hear, and that's married or divorced. Because when someone gets married, it changes their collecting habits, and when someone gets divorced, it changes their collecting habits." So I said to my wife before we got married, "Christy, listen, I'll do pretty much whatever you want, but I am not giving up my animation. I love it too much." "Yeah, all right, just that's fine." So she's been wonderful. She's been just great about supporting it.
That's so good. I see people post this online a lot, and a lot of times it's new collectors. They'll purchase some pieces, and then they want to make sure they preserve it properly to make sure that it doesn't have vinegar syndrome and some of these other problems that run into it not getting airing out or whatever. So when you have a collection the size that you do, how do you properly make sure that you're maintaining them without damaging them?
Well, I mean, the vintage celluloid is a lot different than acetate.
Hmm.
So the Disney and Warner Brothers art that was done before acetate was really developed or used are much, much more fragile. So they will get the waves and they'll get the coloration and that kind of thing. Acetate's really pretty durable, and so are the paints that they use on it. I just have not had issues with peeling or anything like that. But the other thing I do is I always have a buffer layer behind the cell. Most of mine are mounted on acid-free foam core with a buffer layer.
Mhm.
But I think the biggest thing that's protected my cells is since day one, I've used um, UV and abrasion resistant plexiglass. I never
Mhm.
use regular glass. And I use museum quality, museum grade plexiglass. And that has really protected them from UV light and from, the reason I started that is I live near a highway in Wisconsin, and you'd hear those semis roll by and they'd be shaking everything in my walls. And I thought, oh my goodness, if anything ever fell, it could shear the cell itself. So I started using the UV plexi and just have stuck with it ever since.
Cool.
So acid-free mats and UV plexi are the way to go.
Do you have any that have got away? The one that you thought, oh, I wish I would have bought that. The one that you think about that is not part of your collection that you had a chance to get and decided not to.
No, it would be more like the 100 that got away that I wanted. Yeah, yeah, I would say that comes up every few months. Oh, I wish I would have gotten that one. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest one is actually a watercolor that Chuck Jones had done. He started doing watercolors, I believe, in the late 80s, early 90s. And he was doing oils before that. And over his career, he did watercolors. But I mean, he started really producing a lot of them then. And there was a terrific cell of Bugs Bunny with Nasty Canasta.
Hmm.
And I had a chance to buy it and I passed. And I've kicked myself ever since. And that was probably 20 years ago. And I still have that on my list of, gee, I wish I would have snagged that one.
You told me in the email that you do taxidermy as well.
Oh, well, there's a whole program by Dr. Seuss called The Unorthodox Taxidermy of Dr. Seuss. And what the Chase Group out of Chicago has done is recreated these bizarre characters that Dr. Seuss created out of real characters in the 1930s.
Hmm.
Dr. Seuss's dad was a zookeeper, and he would come home with the remnants of animals that had passed away at the zoo. And Dr. Seuss would create new characters out of the
Huh.
bones. And it became known as the Unorthodox Taxidermy of Dr. Seuss. And he sold it like I think in Look or Life magazine in the 1930s for like $10. You could buy his recreated 3D. So it's this size
Yeah.
or bigger. Some of them are huge. you could buy them mail order from him. And then Chase was able to track down the originals, and each year for like the last 20 years, they've released one unorthodox taxidermy. And they're all limited editions. They're all in about, I think the editions are about 750 now.
Uh-huh.
But they have just continued to appreciate in value. They've really gone up. And
So do
they're
you
fun.
own any of them?
Yeah, I have the whole set.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I said 20 years. It's really, I think, 18 years, but I have all 18. Yeah, let me quick grab something. I think I have a
Yeah.
photo.
Because I've never heard of that. That's the first time I've heard that before.
Yeah, there's a great book called The Secret Art of Dr. Seuss.
Mm-hmm.
And they have some of the pieces in here, just to give you an idea. I don't know how well you can see that, but those
wow,
are
yeah.
creatures that, and that's what they look like. And those, they're just really bizarre, strange characters that come from his mind.
My wife almost drew the line with me at Animation Cels. I'm almost positive she'd draw the line at the Dr. Seuss animals. I think she'd say, okay, that's enough.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I think that's where she would say, okay, we need to have a talk. That's amazing.
I've heard that many times. I just ignore it.
Yep. That goes.
Yeah.
So are there any cartoons that you've searched for but have never been able to find art for, things that have never been released that will never be released, but for whatever reason you still search for it?
Well, again, because pre-World War II, Warner Brothers washed their cels and reused them. So literally that art all went down the drain. Anything that's pre-World War II from Warner Brothers was something that was stuck in a drawer by an animator or a director. And those are very valuable. After World War II, they went to acetate and saved them until Jack Warner got rid of them all. Mm-hmm. But there's always like finding an original Michigan J. Frog cel, for example. He was really only in one cartoon in the vintage years, and there's very few cels from that. Things like that, you always kind of pique your interest. And I think, so missing so many years of that wonderful art, I just think it's a tragedy. Beyond that, though, there's a couple galleries in California in particular that get into not only the mainstream stuff, but get into the more obtuse, or however obscure maybe is a better word. For example, I was looking for a friend who was a big fan of Roger Ramjet. And Roger Ramjet was a cartoon in the early 60s. I don't know how many seasons it was out there, but and there's a gallery in California, Van Eaton Gallery, that carried Roger Ramjet cels. So I was able to get one for him. It was reasonably priced, and I gave it as a gift. And so there's obscure characters like that. But again, I'm kind of focused in the areas that we've talked about. So I don't go too far astray normally, unless it's a friend looking for something, and I keep my eyes open for them.
Wow. So let's say new collectors, people that might be watching this and they have thought about purchasing it but never have. Where would you suggest a new collector start when they want to get into the hobby of collecting this type of art?
It's changed so much over the years that I used to be able to say, look at, these these 10 galleries, because what happens is galleries tend to reflect their own interests. So most galleries will carry Disney art. Well, I'm not a Disney person. Roger Rabbit is Disney, but that's probably the only cels that I own that are truly Disney. And even then, people, it was done in collaboration with other studios. The Heritage has an auction every year. Actually, they have multiple auctions now. It's called, just their website is, I think, ha.com. Mm-hmm. And they have auctions twice a year, and there's some incredible art that comes through that. The fellow who runs that is a guy named Jim Lentz, and Jim used to own an animation gallery in Chicago, and now he coordinates the auction program. And his connections have brought some just incredible art there. But I think the biggest advice I'd give somebody is stay focused on what you're looking for and be demanding. Don't get a cel just for the sake of getting a cel. And don't get a cel because you think you're going to make a profit selling it.
Hmm.
Been there, done that. And sometimes it works, but often it doesn't. I have parts of my collection that are probably worth less than what I paid for them.
Hmm.
And that's just part of the game. But if you're not demanding, there's less of a chance it will appreciate down the road. So I would just say, get that cel that is exactly what you're looking for. And if it's not, keep looking. It's probably out there, but it could take months. It could take a couple years to find it, but it's worth it in the end.
What do you think of NFTs?
Don't get them.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not advising. I'm just saying, I don't understand them.
I don't understand.
Non-fungible tokens, right?
And I thought there were some similarities in the sense that it feels like you have an ownership of a singular moment, like in this case, a special picture or artwork or something like that. I see some similarities, and I didn't know if you saw them as like the next generation or the digital version of animation cels.
I think I just read last week that Warner Brothers was going to start selling some NFTs. And I thought, wow, I just, to me, a big part of having the collection is being able to share it with other people. And I'm just not sure how that works with NFTs. I'm just not that familiar with it. But I like to be able to touch and feel and hold the cels that these wonderful directors and animators created years and years ago versus touching my screen here. It's a different animal.
I get it. It's just so amazing to me how my interest in cel collection changed. As a new collector, you purchase a cel and you're like, oh, cool, I want to get more. And now a couple of years into it, I'm finding that I'm more picky and I'm not as purchasing as, I'm not going for quantity anymore. Before I was like, oh, I want to get as much of what I can remember and as much of it as I can afford. And now it's like, no, I think I want to save and buy the ones that really resonate with me from certain scenes, certain characters, things like that are really higher end ones. So I wonder if I think a lot of cel collectors do the same thing. They go through certain ebbs and flows on what the things that they do want to collect. I don't know. It seems like a lot of times the collectors morph in their interest over the years too. So for you, it sounds like you pretty much figured it out, but you've been doing it for a couple of decades.
Yeah, that's because I'm old. It's amazing what you learn the older you get. And when you get to be a dinosaur, you feel pretty smart. But what happened, what you described happened to me. I started collecting limited editions and of Warner Brothers. And I was at a show, a Chuck Jones showroom, and this is, probably the mid 90s, I would guess. And they had some Grinch art up there. But it was production art versus a limited edition. And I had never made the leap into production art. And the person I was working with, a fellow named Robert Patrick, said, Bill, you really need to take the next step into production art. And he's the person I blame for me getting into the Grinch the way I have. And I bought 2 cels at that show. And again, I started understanding the dynamics between a limited edition, which is a recreation of a scene, versus the actual scene that was under camera that I saw on television in 1966.
Right.
And same with Roger Rabbit. Almost all that I have is Roger Rabbit is production art. So my point is just what you said. You tend to learn things and grow as a collector over time, whether it be migrating from limited editions to production art, or whether it be narrowing your focus of what you want to collect, or being more demanding. I think it's natural transition.
So are limited edition and cels the same thing?
No, cels is basically a printed process on acetate, but a limited edition is normally, it's changed over the years, but traditionally it was hand painted line work and then hand inked on the backside.
Okay.
Then they started doing printed line work on the front rather than hand inked, but still painted on the back. But cels are printed and printed. So that's why they're much less expensive, but they're not really from the hand of any artist. It's really through a printing machine.
Do you find So when you look at listings online, you
Mhm.
probably have gotten pretty good at identifying when things are mislabeled. So you look at it and you say, oh, that's not a production cell, obviously, because of this, this, and this. And sometimes things are mislabeled online. And sometimes you wonder, even if the seller understands, if they've put the wrong description on, not knowing the difference, because, they're trying to price something for a production art when really it was a Cell or something along those lines. And that seems to happen a lot too, because sometimes people don't know what they got.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I see people regularly selling it as a CELL.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the vernacular is really CEL.
Right.
So they don't understand the distinction there. But frankly, I did that about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, inadvertently. I had a piece that I purchased about 10 years ago, and the gallery that I bought it from told me that it was a publicity cell that was used by The Simpsons in late 80s, early 90s when the
Okay.
series first came out. And I decided, I actually had two of them. And I decided I was going to sell one, and I put it online on eBay. And within 24 hours, I got an email from someone who said, well, actually, you need to know this is not a publicity sell. It's something that somebody did based upon, I think, one of the color keys that was given to the animators, but it's not legitimate.
Oh,
And I was not happy with the gallery that sold it to me because it was presented that way. So I immediately pulled it from eBay, um, because I don't want to be one of those people who misrepresent. I want
right.
people, to be able to trust what I put out there. And if I see somebody mislabeling things, I'll email them, but I'll try to be very delicate about it. No, just a friendly reminder that this is this, not that.
Right.
And sometimes people are very appreciative, and other times I learned some new naughty words. So you just never know.
Well, yeah, I get that, because you don't want to put yourself in a bad situation if you're selling something misrepresenting it, not knowing
Right.
that, that puts you in a bad spot, because ultimately that could put you in trouble, because, if they have a dispute, then what happens? You don't want
Yeah.
to get to that point if you can avoid it.
No, absolutely. And I have 100% rating on eBay, and I want to protect that.
Mhm.
I don't sell that much on eBay anymore, and certainly not a lot of animation. But if I do, I want people to have some confidence when they buy it, and I want to be able to.
Uh-oh. I don't know. One of us froze.
You
It could
know,
be me. Oh, there we go. It froze for just a second
it
there.
did, yeah.
Okay, I couldn't. I think we're okay though. It looks like it's still recording. Um, but nonetheless, I've noticed too on eBay and some of these different auction sites, um, people will take a listing from eBay and they'll post it on Facebook, and then people will try to analyze what they think about it. And sometimes there's people that purposely try to go out of their way to try to find fake cells and things that have been reproduced or maybe misrepresented online. And what I've noticed a lot of times is that people sometimes have the right intention of trying to help other people that are thinking about purchasing high-end items, and they don't know if what they're getting is actually being represented the right way. And then there's some people that give terrible advice. They're like, oh, no, this is bad because of this and this. And you look at it and you say, this guy has no idea what they're talking about. But the random Facebook person's going to read this and think they're an expert on it, and they're going to be led in the wrong direction. I've seen so many different people post things that are untrue about cells online. Sometimes you scratch your head and you're like, man, do I even know what I'm talking about anymore? It just, there's so many different opinions about stuff like that online.
Well, my wife often challenges me whether I know what I'm talking about anymore. So it's not an unusual feeling for me. But no, I do see that. I see that. And again, if I see something that's mislabeled, I will try to correct
Mhm.
that. But I also don't push it because, again, you do have some people out there who feel they know more about it than you do. And you're not going to convince them
Hmm.
because they want it to be something.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I typically, I mean, I can't say that I don't buy on eBay because I do occasionally, but I really try to work through some galleries because most of the galleries that I know that are still around have been around for a long time and will stand behind their work. I mean, there's a couple galleries. I mentioned Comic Mint in Australia is terrific for The Simpsons.
Hmm.
Wonderful World of Animation in California is good. In Culver City, Animazing Gallery in New York City. I'm sorry, Animazing is now in Las Vegas. Um, So there are galleries out there where they have responsible owners who stand behind their work and know what they're talking about because they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
That's
Do
but
you
unfortunately there's a lot fewer of them than there used to be.
yeah. Do you still watch cartoons? Do you watch new cartoons or do you watch just old cartoons?
I will watch a few new cartoons. Like I've always admired a director, Daryl Van Sitters, and Daryl is doing the new Tom and Jerry's. And when he first got the contract, when his company got the contract to do the new Tom and Jerry's, he was telling me about it, and he said he really wanted to go back to the old 1950s look of the characters, not how the characters had morphed in the 60s. And then Chuck Jones, when he went to MGM, he changed them again. And I really admired that about Daryl, is that he did, I think, one of the last two 1990s Warner Brothers cartoons, Chuck Jones cartoons, called Pulitzer Prize. And it was a really well done cartoon, in part because he did the characters, Pete Puma and Foghorn Leghorn, I think, as the way they were done in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, not morphed them. So my point is that I like certain things by certain directors. I especially like intelligent cartoons. Chuck Jones used to say that I only do cartoons for myself. Because I don't believe in talking down to kids. And if I can make myself laugh and I can make the other directors laugh, that's really what we're shooting for. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So it's kind of a long-winded answer. Yes, I do watch a few of them, but there's so many of them now that and I don't find them particularly funny or particularly clever.
Yeah.
So how about you? Do you watch a lot of them?
Well, my kid's young, so we watch the 7-year-old cartoons, like for that would appeal to a 7-year-old. And then my daughter, who's 1.5, 2, sometimes likes the Mickey Mouse and stuff like that. But
Sure.
I don't, there's not a lot of new cartoons that I end up watching. I find myself going through and watching old Simpsons or something like that, and just kind of being satisfied with that. And that kind of goes back to the Chip and Dale thing. They, I think, found the perfect balance of the nostalgia factor of being able to watch those cartoons in the 80s. And oh man, that's all I'm going to bring. I'll give another recommendation to it. It was so fun to see all the other cartoon characters that were brought into it, including Roger Rabbit. So there's a great cameo from him in there. You got to check it out, but it made me want to go back and watch all the cartoons over again.
I'll keep that in mind.
Well, here's another problem. You're going to want to go out and buy more pieces after you watch it.
Yeah. Well, my bank account has something to say about that too. So, but going back, I love the inside jokes. When talk about intelligent cartoons, I like the inside jokes. There's one that I'll never forget. It's excuse me, it's got Sylvester and Tweety, and Sylvester's chasing Tweety through an old basement, and they're walking past some pieces of art. And in the background, there's this big portrait and a side view of a guy with a nose like this. And at the bottom, it says Frizz, which was after Frizz Frayling, the director. So one of the background artists just snuck that in there as a little jab at Frizz. Or if you look at some of the old Chuck Jones cartoons, they'll have the Pratt Saloon for Holly Pratt, or Avery Hotel, or they'll name various areas after people who worked on the cartoon, which I think is kind of funny. Love those inside jokes.
Yeah. Kind of a weird question in a sense, but you find this with people that purchase and sell art. Do you ever consider, based on the size of your collection, having its own like LLC or something along those lines for tax purposes when it comes to your collecting?
No, I haven't. I'm getting to the point where at some point I'll stop collecting, and at some point we'll have to liquidate the collections. If I get run over by a truck, poor Christy is going to have to deal with this. And I know some people driving trucks who are looking for me, so I have to be extra careful. So I want to give her, enough information that if she needs to sell it, she can. And if that means creating an LLC, or that, certainly we have it in our will on what happens to the collections. The other thing, and we want to donate part of the collection to certain groups. The other thing that I highly encourage people to do, though, is get insurance for your animation. There are a couple companies, it's fine arts coverage. It's generally, unless if you have a smaller collection, you're probably fine under your homeowners. But fine art collections give you extra protection, and it's not particularly expensive.
Hmm.
But I really encourage that. I had an incident where I lost a package not too long ago. And like I say, I've been collecting since 1980 and never lost a package, but I lost a really valuable one. And the insurance company, I'm very thankful that I had insurance coverage because they were able to cover it. And I just think it's a prudent thing for people to do, and it doesn't cost a lot.
Hmm. What was it? That's got to be hard to, I don't know how long ago that happened, but I always wonder if you were to ship something like that and there was a dispute, to try to prove the value of what you're sending, because a lot of it's so arbitrary in a way, other than what the person was willing to pay for it. How do you even prove the value of some of these pieces?
Well, yeah, I was fortunate because in this case I had purchased it. So I
Mm,
actually had an invoice from the people that I purchased it from that we just submitted to the insurance company. But you're right, it is subjective, but at the same time, the insurance companies don't know what this stuff goes for. And they're not going to sit there and argue with you if you're $100 or $200 valuation higher or lower. They're going to take you at your word unless, there's anything that's kind of ridiculous in terms of the pricing. Um, but if the loss is hundreds or thousands, a few $1,000s, I don't think they'll really fuss about it. You need to
yeah.
be accurate. But it's kind of like if you've watched what's the show on PBS that
Oh, the Roadhouse or
yeah,
Roadshow?
Antiques
Antique
Roadshow.
Roadshow.
They'll say, I think the value on this is $1,500, but for insurance purposes, I'd put it down at 2,000.
Hmm.
And I would encourage people to make sure you have a current market value um, for your art. I send, maybe every quarter I'll send an updated inventory to my insurance company, and I will adjust the prices, the current value of prices based upon what I see in the market.
It's quite a
So
spreadsheet.
yeah, yeah, I'm glad my wife is an accountant. She was helpful in setting that up.
Well, not
So
so the one piece that ended up missing, have you ever searched for it to see if it showed up somewhere? Like, oh, someone might have like picked it up, it fell off a truck, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is the piece that they mailed to me, never showed up, and it's on eBay.
oh, believe me, I have my eyes open for it, and so do the people who sold it to me, and I suspect the insurance company does too. And because the insurance company does keep a record of kind of what's stolen or
Yeah.
lost or whatever. And oh yeah, we keep an eye open. I know that many years ago, the Chuck Jones people had someone did a smash and grab, and they had some art in
Oof.
their window, and the guy grabbed it and ran. And I also know they had some theft of some cels from How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And there was a website out there where they posted it and said, if you come across these cels, they are in fact stolen. So please report them. And the FBI has actually followed up on some of those cases.
Well, it's that happened to Nicolas Cage, the actor. He bought, I think, dinosaur skull from an auction house overseas. He paid like $1 million for this skull. It ships to him. He has it on display. Later it's found out to be stolen. So a government said, actually, this was taken from our land. We own it. So they came and they took it away. And of course, he never got a refund for it. There was a big lawsuit because of it. So if you're buying stolen goods, that's another thing too. If you might not even know, like let's say these Grinch pieces were pawned off somewhere, you think, oh, what an awesome opportunity. You buy this thing, FBI gets flagged. Next thing you know, they're taking your piece and you're not able to get your money back. That's a scary scenario.
Yeah, you never want to answer the door where the first thing they show you is a badge.
That's
That's
right.
generally not a good sign of what's to come. But yeah, I think you have to be careful. And that's why I encourage people to, work through a reputable gallery if they can. Not,
Yeah,
not always, like I say, I'm an eBayer as well, but mostly through galleries. So
that, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it is. And I tell you, I think one of the nicest things for me is when I get a new cell, it's like Christmas. And I've had Christmas now for 40 years because I still I have a package I'm looking forward to getting to tomorrow. And I'll open it up and I'll do the old Tex Avery eyes where it'll go, ooga, where the eyes will pop out. And maybe my jaw drops to the ground and hey, there's that piece I ordered that I was able to find. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
is fun.
Are you like
when I,
me? You'll check the tracking number about 5 times.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't help it. Even though you
Yeah.
know it's not changed. It
Yeah.
hasn't changed, but I'll go check it again. Why not?
Yeah. And I remember I also, and one of the recurring themes here is I'm terrible when it comes to meeting celebrities or people that I admire, I guess. And I had a chance to meet Chuck Jones. And again, I sounded more like Daffy Duck than anybody, stuttering away. But I said, Chuck, I have to tell you, the best thing about collecting your art is I have it in my hallway at home. It's actually a scene from the cartoon Bully for Bugs. And I look at it first thing in the morning and I smile. And I look at it right before I go to bed and I smile. And he seemed to appreciate that. And it's true. I still look at those cells and I remember the scene. I remember the gag. I remember the voice, and I love it. And to me, that's what it should be all about.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
fun.
probably a bad sign if what you remember is the price tag and not the feeling it gave you.
Yeah, yeah. I have some price tags that gave me nausea. So I bought a few of those over my
Oh, that's
lifetime. But
fantastic.
yeah.
So is there anything we didn't cover that you think would be good to talk about?
I think Rocky and Bullwinkle is fun stuff. Again, Jay Ward is really clever. Bill Scott, the whole group that did those. I have mostly limited editions because again, most of the art was long gone. It went to Mexico or destroyed. But I find Jay Ward is a lot of fun. Um, but I think the word of advice I'd give to potential collectors is just stay focused. Um, and you are probably going to make a few bad purchases.
Hmm.
And you just need to understand that. You win some, you lose some, and hopefully you'll win a lot more than you lose. But all of us do it. And as I said, I've been doing this for 40 years and I'm still culling my collection. If I find a better scene, I'll sell what I have and try to buy the new one. And I would encourage people to keep doing that as well. So
That's great.
that's it.
Art collection. I never thought in a million years, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I'd be collecting something like this, I would have been, no way, not a chance. But man, all it takes is one. And you find it just takes over and you just find so much enjoyment of looking these things up and looking at other people's collections and the things that they're posting. I don't know what it is. There's something special connection to something you remember off the television. I really don't know what it is, but man, is it fun.
I can tell you, and I don't mean to belabor it, but I'll tell you mine quickly. And that's when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I used to walk home for lunch. I'd be sitting there in front of the TV set with my peanut butter sandwich and glass of milk, and they ran cartoons over the lunch hour. And my dad would come home from work and sit in the kitchen. But he said, if they ever have that big old rooster on, referring to Foghorn Leghorn, he said, let me know and I'll come out and watch it with you. So I would go get my dad when Foghorn was on, and the two of us would just sit there, and he'd have his sandwich and I'd have mine, and we both chuckle at the Foghorn Leghorn cartoons. And so it was kind of that bonding experience that I never forgot to this day. So You're right. You just make a connection with it, and it never seems to disappear.
So hold up. You would be able to walk home from school for lunch and then you'd walk yourself back to school?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a different
Man,
time.
this was the early 60s. You weren't worried about getting kidnapped or brutalized or anything. No.
you
No.
get a full break. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's
My
a whole
parents
different
were never.
experience.
My parents were hoping someone would kidnap me. They were never concerned about that. Take them, please. So anyway.
Oh, Bill, this has been so much fun, man.
It
I
has
learned a
been.
lot. Thanks for showing off part of your collection. I love the Simpsons stuff, so that was super duper cool. And I know a lot of people that will watch this will enjoy it too and learn from it, which I think is a good thing because there's not a lot of people like I know people like to talk about it, and I know there's some really strong communities, but you just don't see a lot of interview styles on YouTube. So I think people are looking for this sort of thing and they like to see these conversations. I'm sure they'll learn a lot from it and from a master like you that have been doing it for decades.
Is there someone behind me? Master like me. No, and I have to say that I get embarrassed because I talk to some of the directors occasionally, and they are so knowledgeable on the animation process versus what I know.
Yeah.
But I just know what I like and what I've learned over the years collecting, and happy to pass it on.
It's amazing. It makes me want to learn more of some of the things that you mentioned, even the what was it that that just the different amount of frames that certain
24
cartoons would
cells a
use, like the
second.
Grinches would use 24. Makes me want to learn even more things. I have an X-Men book, and it just came out recently in the last couple of years. And her name is Julia, and her husband also worked on the show as writers. And I learned a lot about the process that way, the production side of things. But from what I understand, they only used like 12 cells instead of 24. So they just like double, they press the button twice or whatever when they were doing the certain thing. It's just amazing. You think there's little things like that in the animation process I never would have thought of. I think that's the next thing I need to start learning more of, because just what you
Well,
brought up with the Grinch was inspiring in that sense.
well, I think that's why the motion is so fluid in the older cartoons. I heard Disney did for some of theirs more than 24 cells per second. But when Hanna-Barbera and people started doing cartoons for television versus movies, they had to economize because the TV stations weren't, or the networks weren't paying much.
Mhm.
So I think 24 cells became 18, became 12. But if you look at it, that's why the motion's a little more herky jerky, or the characters are, fixed versus movement. Um, that's why the 40s and 50s cartoons to me were the golden age. They were the heyday because they were so well done
Oh yeah.
and
Well,
smart.
it was awesome. Well, Bill, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, I had a blast. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and if people have questions, if they can run them through you or however, I'd be happy to help them.
Yeah. So if someone does want to reach out, how would they do that? What's the best way?
Well, they can, probably the best way is they can email me.
Mhm.
Am I going to regret giving this out?
It's up to you. I mean, you
I
never
know.
know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you never do. But if I can help somebody, I'm happy to. It's B like Bravo, and then my last name Heeter, Heeter 2. So B Heeter 2, and I think I'm the last surviving AOL member.
You might
So
be.
so B Heeter 2 at AOL.com, and let's hope the email comes through.
One day you'll hope someone hits you up on AOL Instant Messenger, but it hasn't happened in a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I
I
think they
used to be an
discontinued that.
innovator. Now I'm a dinosaur, like I say.
A big thank you to Bill Heeter, who has so much knowledge and was so fun to talk to. I feel like I've learned so much more. Every time we do one of these interviews, I feel like I've learned just a little bit more. So a big thank you again to him. And I hope to do many more of these. We have a few more scheduled that we haven't recorded yet that I hope to have on the channel here sooner than later. Leave some messages in the comments. I love seeing those. And if you've got any questions, feel free to do that. If you have any questions for Bill, I don't mind relaying that to him. That's not a problem either. And maybe you just have some other interview requests or people that you would like to see on the show, go ahead and reach out to me, and we'll try to make that happen. Otherwise, have a great day. We'll see you.